Hey there, Dan Kaufman, and this is episode 38, Grace Over Guilt. So, this week I killed an episode. I had it all written, had it half produced, good title, decent bones, and then I scrapped the whole thing, deleted it, because I realized it was quietly teaching you the exact trap that I had spent the last years clawing my way out of, last 3 years. So today you're going to get the thing that I replaced it with. And I think it might be the single most useful exercise that I know of. It's not a business plan, it's closer to an invoice for the life that you actually want. And most people never once sat down and added it up. So today's a lesson. This is the day that I hand you something that you can actually use, not just a story to nod along with. So grab something to write with if you can, because this one is a do it with me, not a listen to me. So let me tell you why I scrapped that episode, that episode and why, because the why is really half the lesson. So the episode was called The Gap, and it was built on that famous idea you've probably heard of about the gap between the work you make and the taste that, made you want to make it in the first place. When you start out, your taste is way ahead of your skill, and the space between the two is really painful. And the whole idea is that you get to close the gap by doing the work. It's fine, it's useful, only for a while. And here's the thing that I watched the gap turn into in my own head and in the heads of just about every person that I've, driven person that I've worked with. It's quietly becoming a performance trap because the gap only measures one thing: the distance between where you are and where you think you should be. And that distance, if you look at it, never closes. That gap just keeps moving. When you move forward, that gap just continues to move forward with it. So you hit the number, the next number moves. You clear the bar moves again. So you finally arrive at the place you're sprinting towards, and it turns out to just be a rest stop, not a destination. And the horizon is backed up another 20 miles while you weren't looking. Chase that gap long enough, and you'll spend your entire life running at a horizon calling the exhaustion progress. So I killed it, and I replaced it with the opposite kind of tool. Not a tool that measures a distance to some moving target, a tool that defines a fixed, specific, actual life and then tells you exactly what it costs. And I call it the Dreamline. Now, credit needs to come where it's due. The bones of this I first ran into years ago through Tim Ferriss, and he has a version of this in his work, and it cracked something open for me. And I've rebuilt it into my own thing since, tuned it, for a way that I actually live. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I invented the frame, because I didn't. I just refuse to let a good idea die on the shelf. So here's the difference between a business plan and a dreamline, and it matters. A business plan tells you what you have to hit: revenue, targets, growth rates, numbers, the numbers that you have to feed, right? The bank account, all that. The dreamline tells you what you're actually building. And then it does something a business plan never ever does for you. It actually sends you the invoice. So here's the actual exercise: 3 columns, do it by hand if you can. There's something about, drawing it by hand that, a keyboard or a computer just can't replicate. So column 1, label having. This is the easiest one. And this is the column everybody defaults to, the one most people never get past. What do you have? What do you want to have? The land, the car, the system that runs the business without you standing it over it every hour. Write down those things. Be specific, be honest, don't flinch, and don't have any false modesty either. If you want the thing, write it down. Now, column 2 is being. This is the column that actually runs the entire show. And this is the one that almost everybody skips because it's the hardest one. And there's no store where you can go in and buy it. The column is not about what you own, it's about who you are. Who do you have to be for this life to be real? For me, when I do this honestly, column 2 reads like a short list I would be genuinely proud of to have somebody read out loud in a room full of people who know me. The father who shows up, the man who does not negotiate with the snooze button at 6 o'clock in the morning. Somebody who's actually present for the people he loves, all the way present, instead of half there with his phone face down on the table pretending that counts. So I want you to hear this clearly. That column 2 is the actual product. Everything else, this whole thing is just packaging around who you become. If you get column one and miss column two, you've built a very expensive display case with nothing worth displaying inside of it. And now for column three, it's doing. So these are the verbs, the experiences, the things you actually want to do with your days on this earth. For me right now, that's talking, where we talked a little bit about on Monday was actually doing the Spartan race and finishing it. It's the rebuilt knee that gets strong enough to sit back under, and doing sprints and running. It's the next chapter of my family that I do not get to fast forward to. And I have to build towards day by day what you were doing, not having, but doing. And here's the mistake I see constantly in column three. So let me flag it for you. People fill it with impressive verbs instead of the true ones. They write the thing that would look good if somebody else read that list, not the thing that they actually ache to do. If your doing column would embarrass you a little to say out loud, it's not big enough or not cool enough. You're probably finally being honest. The truest entry in my doing column for a while was just be in the room when my people were in the room. That's not going on a motivational poster. It's also the one that even made me cry writing it. So write the true ones. So now I can hear that objection because I've made it myself out loud to my own reflection. But Dan, that's super nice of you. I have responsibilities. I've got people depending on me. I have bills that are not optional. I just can't sit down and design a dream like I'm some kid with a vision board. I have to keep my life running. Listen, I get it, and here's my thought process on this. This is not instead of your responsibilities. This is the thing that tells you which responsibility are actually yours and which ones you just picked up along the way and never put down. Most of us are carrying a bunch of weight that isn't even ours. Obligations we inherited, standards we borrowed from somebody else that we were trying to impress, definition of success we never once chose, but we just absorbed it. So the invoice doesn't add weight to your life. Done honestly, it usually takes some off. Because when you finally see the actual cost of the life that you actually want, you find how much that you're spending on a life that you never wanted in the first place. So the objection really has it backwards. You don't do this after you get the responsibilities handled. You do this so you can find out which of the responsibilities were ever real for you. Now, here's the part that changes everything. And this is where it stops being a nice journaling exercise and starts being a mirror that you can't look away from. You total it up. You work out the real monthly operating cost of the life in those three columns. Not a revenue goal, not a someday number with a bunch of zeros you picked because it sounded impressive, a lifestyle invoice. What does the next version of your life actually cost to run per month in real dollars, in hours, and in the kind of energy you can't fake for very long? And here's what happens almost every single time somebody does this honestly for the first time. The number is smaller than the number they have been killing themselves to hit. Now, that isn't a comfort, and don't hear that as a comfort. That's a diagnosis because it means a big chunk of the grind, the part that's been costing you your sleep and your presence and your Tuesdays and your weekends, was never actually about life at all. It was all about the scoreboard. It was about a number that was going to make you feel like just enough, and a number that has never once done that job for a single human being in history. It's not going to start with you. So let's make this a little bit more concrete because I don't want to leave this in theory. So I sat down and did this for one slice of my own life recently. And I had my battle team and the Iron Council do this. And I'm not going to put the whole ledger on the internet, but here's the shape of it. I had a revenue number in my head that I had been treating like the finish line. Round, impressive, the kind of number you say out loud to people and, they nod. And when I actually built the invoice, the real monthly cost of my life in those three columns, the number the life actually required was a real fraction of that finish line that I had bleeding for. Not half, less than that. So what was the gap between those two numbers? I'd been calling it ambition for years. And when I finally looked straight at it, the gap wasn't ambition, it was fear. It was proof that I was still trying to buy. It was a scoreboard I was running up, for an audience that, as best as I can tell, doesn't even exist anymore if it actually ever did. So the invoice didn't just tell me what my life costs. It told me exactly how much my work was fear wearing an ambitions jacket. That number was worth more than any other revenue number I have ever hit. Notice what the invoice does to column 2. You can't buy your way into the being column. There's no monthly cost. There's no line item that purchases being present for the people who you love. There's no price for being the guy who gets up on the second alarm. Those are not things that you pay for. Or, yeah, those are not things that you pay for. They're practices. You earn them one glamorous rep at a time, which means that the second you total up that invoice honestly, you find out two things at once. You find out how much your actual dream money cannot touch, and you find out how much of it you've been actually avoiding all this time by staying furiously busy with the only part money can touch. And that's a hard mirror. And I get it. I've stood in front of it a lot. Which brings me to the thing this entire show is built on. The distinction I come back to every single week because it's load bearing. It's the load bearing wall of the whole house. Guilt is doing something wrong and regretting it. Shame is feeling like a loser and wondering what I'm ever doing here. So sit with that for a second, because the Dreamline lives right on the seam between those two. Shame chases a revenue number to prove a point to somebody who probably doesn't even freaking care. And really think about that for a second. Shame's telling you to chase that, to show off, to keep up with the Joneses. And it picks a figure with a lot of zeros on it because the figure is supposed to finally make you feel like you're enough. Finally make that old voice shut up. Finally prove something to a person or a parent or a version of a room that in a lot of cases went home years ago and isn't keeping score. And let's face it, most people don't care what you're doing. They might be impressed maybe for a minute, and then they're going to go off and start thinking about what they need to do. So that's the scoreboard built for an audience that's already left, that doesn't give a shit anymore. So guilt is a completely different animal. And here's the part nobody tells you. Guilt is actually useful. Guilt is what you feel when you catch that gap between the life you say you want and the way you actually spend that Tuesday morning and afternoon. Guilt doesn't ask you to hate yourself. It doesn't ask you to wonder what you're even doing here. It asks you to close a specific nameable gap. That's it. And a Dreamline gives your guilt somewhere honest to the point. Gives your guilt somewhere honest to point to. Because now you know that number. You know the person in column 2. And you can tell in about 10 seconds flat whether today moved you towards that life or just towards a bigger scoreboard. So let me put a fine point on it. Growth is a metric on a dashboard. Freedom is the experience of being the person in column 2. You can grow every number you own and still not be free. And if you have ever in your life met somebody who's absolutely everything in column 1 and nothing in column 2, then you already know precisely what this looks like. See if you've seen it, maybe even up close, maybe even in the mirror. So I've been that person. I've had that vision of a business where the dashboard was green in every direction, every arrow pointing up, and I still felt like a stranger walking around inside my own life because I had optimized the entire machine for an invoice that I never actually sat down and wrote. I was paying every single month in the only currency that actually matters for a life I had never once stopped to design. I was just running fast and not thinking. And it was in a direction that I never chose. So that's the trap the Dreamline is built to spring you out of. It forces you to name the life first, price it honestly, all 3 columns, and then, and only then, go out and earn against a number that actually means something to a real person living an actual real life. So here's what I actually want you to keep in this episode. Shame chases a revenue target and number to prove a point. Guilt uses a Dreamline to help you build a life that you actually want to live and thrive in. One of those you run into the ground chasing a horizon that keeps backing up. The other one hands you an invoice, a real one, and then dares you to become the person that you can, kind of person who can pay for it. And I don't mean the money. The money, quite frankly, is the easy part. I mean becoming that person in column 2. So here's your homework for today. Take one category of your life, just one, and push it 6 months out. Build those 3 columns, having, being, doing, and then total the real life monthly cost of that life in all 3 columns. You're probably going to be surprised how reachable it is. That surprise right there is the whole point. Then hit reply on your newsletter and send me your being column. Those of you that aren't subscribed, go to news.grace-over-guilt.com and subscribe, and you'll get this in the newsletter format. So I want to see the being column, not the having column. I don't need your list of stuff that you want. Send me who you're trying to become. That's the one that I actually want to read. So again, my name is Dan Kaufman. This has been Grace Over Guilt. Friday, we talk about that second alarm and the one decision that actually decides everything. The one you make when nobody on earth is watching. Now go write that invoice, and I'll see you Friday.